As you embark on your next project to redesign the packaging or the box of an existing product, I want to go over some ideas or some thoughts on how you can approach solving the problem of creating new packaging design here. A good idea is to follow these steps. This is basically the 5 steps in any design project. So strategy is basically trying to get as much of the thinking done ahead of time before you start drawing thumbnails or get on the computer. The more problems you can solve or the more questions you can answer before you actually start thinking in terms of design, the better off you're going to be. Second step here is concept. That's coming up with the idea for how you want to approach the project. And then once you have the idea or the concept, then you embark on the actual design of your packaging. The last 2 steps, execution and presentation, we'll cover as you get further into the assignment here. For the strategy, you have to do, and again, the more problems you can solve or the more questions you can answer before you actually start designing, the better. So for strategy, it's important to think, what is the problem you are actually trying to solve? Is this a new product and you're launching it, you're bringing it to market, you need people to become aware of it? Is it a redesign of an existing packaging line? You want to refresh it, maybe you want to appeal to a different demographic. So the objectives you want to achieve, the audience you're talking to, and then if this is part of a larger brand, how does it fit within the brand positioning with all the other products? Oftentimes we start with the design brief, where you basically sit down and talk about what is the message you're trying to get across through the packaging? Who are you speaking to? And that's going to be most important here. How do you want the brand to be perceived? Is it more upscale? Is it more affordable? And then what are the executional guidelines or budget constraints? Neither of which you really have to worry about for this product because we don't actually have a budget for it. And essentially, the sky's the limit as far as producing this design. You shouldn't let your creativity at this point be constrained by the thoughts of budgets or how we're going to actually produce this. You need to determine what the objective is to your package. And a good way to start, and I'm not having you guys do a full creative brief on this, but if you can write down in one sentence, what do you want your product packaging to achieve? Do you want to reposition this brand as more upscale and more sophisticated, more expensive? Do you want it to appeal to a younger demographic and appear more hip and edgy, to use 2 very overused phrases you hear from clients all the time? So if you can write a simple sentence of what you want to accomplish with your box redesign, that's going to be a good jumping off point to start the design process. Think about where your product is going to be viewed. And I put 2 examples up here. When you're talking about a cologne, that's something that's very intimate. It's something that people are going to hold in their hands. If they're in the store, they're going to want to, have it brought out from the case and maybe demonstrate it. They're going to be holding it in their hands. Other packaging, like you see here with all the soft drinks for the Super Bowl, that's designed packaging to be seen at a distance. It's something that needs to make a big impact from far away. So think about the environment and the circumstances, how people are going to be looking at this packaging design. For most of you, this is a product that you're going to find in the grocery store. A lot of people like to go down the aisles and actually pick up the packaging. So, and read it over or look at it. So I would err on the side of having this be a package design that can be really kind of viewed up close and more intimately. Then you get to the concept or the idea phase. Is there anything you can bring to your packaging design? If it's something aimed at kids, can you inject a little humor, a little kind of whimsy or fun into it? Do we need to see the project? Should you plan on putting a window into your packaging so that we can actually see it? Or is this a product like cornflakes that doesn't actually look all that good, so we don't necessarily need to see it through a window in the packaging? Again, you can use your design to make products look more upscale, more sophisticated, more expensive. How much information do you need to impart? So here you can see kind of a label belly band over the one project or the one product here, where it's a little accordion fold so that you can get more information in the packaging. Down below you can see again a product where some humor has been injected into it. If it's aimed at kids, that's always a good idea to think about. More ideas here. Again, is there a way that your product is consumed or going to be used that you can incorporate into the packaging? This was pretty fun too, thinking in terms of a pizza box. People oftentimes order pizzas for big parties, and at parties you may have DJs, so designing this whole pizza box so it unfolds and actually looks like a kind of DJ turntable is kind of a cute idea. Also, are there ways, and we've talked about how sustainability is becoming a really major concern in packaging design. Brands want to be perceived as being environmentally conscientious and actually want to contribute as little to landfill as possible. So is there a way that you can, through perhaps the manufacturing process or the design, in this case you can see, one of the big trends right now is this idea of origami folding as a way of using less material but getting the same effect or the desired effect that you would normally get with more insular packaging. I put this in here. I thought this was really funny. So this is a brand of milk playing off the old conspiracy theory of aliens coming down and abducting cows. So they've actually kind of injected the humor into the packaging here. So the cap's a little UFO, the bottle's in this tapered shape, and then you see the poor cow being beamed up. So again, this in your thumbnail stage, if you want to do something a little bit more involved than just a strict six-sided box design, in your initial thumbnail phase, this would be where you would try and work out some of those ideas and details before you actually get on the computer. Again, this idea of different ways of using material, and again, a lot of it really goes back to the idea of sustainability. How can we use less material, and maybe through folding it in unique ways, we can still achieve the desired effect without using as much material, contributing as much material to landfills. Once you start working on your design, you're going to start working with different visual elements. Type is a huge consideration, and the type of fonts or typefaces you use can really help get across whatever branding you're trying to do. You also may want to use photos or illustrations or graphics. At this point, I will tell you I have a limited budget available for stock images, so send me a message if you need a specific shot of pasta or anything that you may need for your packaging design. Illustrations, if you want to do a custom illustration, or again, like I said, I have some a limited budget. If you find something on iStockPhoto.com, hit me up and I'll see if I can get it from you. Also, just graphics, and we'll talk more about what that is. Is that pattern, or is that color blocking? Speaking about type, again, the fonts you choose are going to go a great distance in conveying the branding or the attitude that you want. Is it something that's clean and modern? Do you want something that's hand-done type that looks a little bit more artistic, looks a little more like a human's involved with it? Can you use type as a pattern, as you see on the food packaging on the left here, where you're conveying a lot of the information in type, but the type actually is a way of creating a pattern. Pattern is a very much on trend element in a lot of packaging design today. Again, very clean, sophisticated, minimal type. If that's your target audience, you might want to consider that as well. Here's an example of more hand-done type, again, for pizza boxes. Here's the idea of using kind of a modern take on Victorian design with the multiple fonts and the kind of mezzo-tinted photos. And again, that is one of the techniques we covered when we talked about working with photos earlier in the semester. Speaking of photography, again, especially in product design, that may be something you want to consider. And again, I do have a limited budget. If you need shots of products or whatnot, I can do that for you. Here's some more examples of using photography too, especially if you're trying to get across a particular flavor. That may be something where you want to use photography in your packaging design. Illustration, again, can be a more humorous illustration. It can be illustration as pattern. There's a lot of different ways that you can use illustration. If you feel up to it and you have some illustration skills, you may want to consider doing your own illustration for your packaging. I mentioned graphics, and that can take a lot of different forms here. On the upper left, you see kind of using these big color blocking areas as part of the packaging design. You can see graphics with shapes, graphics with patterns. These are all things that you can use in addition to your type or any imagery in your packaging design. Here's some beautiful packaging where really the color blocking is the primary visual element here. There's minimal type. In fact, you have to open it before you actually see what the product name is in there. When it comes time to execute your designs, obviously you'll be doing it on the computer, and we'll talk about the different software you may use when we get to the three-dimensional digital mock-up on this as well. But again, if you're doing hand-done type, you might want to do that by hand and scan it in. But normally, as the package designer, you would have to give consideration as to how this is ultimately going to be produced. So that may mean working with printers, selecting the actual type of paper, cardboard, whatever the substrate you're creating your packaging out of. As you start working on your design and throughout the design process, you should periodically stop and ask yourself these questions. What is the purpose of the design? Is the execution appropriate? Do the materials used best represent the design concept? Is it well crafted? Is it presented professionally and appropriately? But every so often, stop and ask yourself, does your design work? At the end of the day, if the design doesn't work for the brand, for the client, for that particular product, it won't be a successful packaging design. When it comes to presentation, we're going to be doing digital mock-ups, and again, I'm going to show you how to do that in both Photoshop, and if you're able to use Adobe Dimensions, that might be able to give you a more realistic render on your product design. And going back to talking about the client brief, again, I'm not asking you to write a client brief for this project, but you have to, in the back of your mind, try and really think who you are talking to and who you're trying to sell your product to. Back in the day, products were designed for the mass market. They were meant to go to everyone of every demographic, every age, every part of the country or around the world. But increasingly, that has moved into from mass marketing to niche markets, where people are very narrowly, or brands or advertisers are very narrowly marketing to very specific demographics. So you need to think about that as you embark on your design here. So what is the age and gender, do you think, predominantly of the consumer of your product? You could even think so far as to what type of occupations do you think they hold? What educational standards have they? Do you think your ideal consumer has graduated college or maybe just high school? Socioeconomic status, is this something where you're aiming very high-end, very expensive? Is this something that's more geared towards people on a more middle income or lower middle income budget? Things like ethnic groupings or cultural backgrounds, religion, those may enter into your thoughts as far as how best to target your consumer. Geographic location. There are different brands that are sold in different parts of the country that you won't find in other places. And then again, with a lot of products, think in terms of the family unit. Is your product really designed for singles, young adults, families, seniors? Those are all things you need to take into consideration. Increasingly with demographics, you see a lot of advertisers relying on what we call psychographics, where they really try and break down, and with all the information everyone gives social media sites like Facebook, they can really break down who exactly they're trying to aim at with their products and with their packaging. So here you can see some primary consumer groups and how it breaks down, trying to really get inside the heads of the consumers they're trying to appeal to. And then from those groupings, you'll often see marketers really kind of hone in on these different categories. So hidden hippies, I like. You consider maybe someone who's a lawyer, but deep inside they really kind of harbor their hidden hippie within. Lifestyle profiling, trying to figure out how people live their lives, that you see the explosion in to-go or ready-to-eat meals as fewer and fewer people are spending time at home cooking, especially young adults. And then this is another thing with packaging, visual referencing. What that means is you're showing on the packaging or on the advertising how you need to go about using this product. And most famously, when the iPad or the iPod came out in 2001, no one knew how to use it. So all the packaging and the advertising, essentially, it was the first MP4 player, and there needed to be a way where you could show people how do you actually use this new device. Aspirations is another big thing to consider in packaging design. Everyone has aspirations. Everyone hopes one day they'll make more money, they'll move up in life, and you see, especially with a lot of luxury brands, the packaging is really designed to kind of aspire or to meet people at their aspirations. But with packaging design too, even for everyday items, you see it with the cooking set here. If I buy these pots and pans, I'll be able to cook like Rachel Ray. If I buy this paint from Martha Stewart Living, I will have Martha Stewart's beautiful taste in furnishings and interiors. Or even in the Wheaties box here, by putting athletes on there, if I eat Wheaties, I will be a world-class athlete even if I never actually get off my couch. Think in terms if your product is gender specific, and it's interesting too. In a lot of products, especially deodorants, the actual ingredients in men's and women's deodorants is exactly the same, with the exception of the fragrance may change. But the packaging is drastically different depending on whether you're appealing to men or women. Increasingly, they're getting away of gendering toy packaging, but you still see quite a bit of that. And you can see here the exact same big wheel on the right, packaged completely different and in different colors depending on which gender child you are aiming for. And then finally, talking a little bit about being culturally specific. Here in Orange County, we are home to many, many diverse communities. And so you may choose a product that you're redesigning the package for. Is it something that is very kind of exclusive to one particular community, or is it something that is specific, but you want to actually break it out into more of the general public so that it appeals to everyone, including people not necessarily out of that culture or that background on here? So things to keep in mind as you start on the creative process, but definitely do some thinking before you put pen to paper and do your thumbnails, and definitely do it before you jump on the computer.